In this video, I'm going to take you inside the Airtable base that we created to run our architecture office. My name is Andres. I have 24 years of experience. I'm a licensed architect. For 11 of these years, I've been running my own practice with my business partner, Juan, and a great team of people. A couple of things that you should know. Before we started the office, we had the chance to work in firms that range in size from just a few people to over 400 in staff. And while practicing on our own, we've had the really awesome privilege to work on projects of all scales in different places in the world. So this is a big wide range of experience in project types, of course, but also we've been exposed to a lot of different methods and approaches to practice management. So this system is the distillation of everything that we've learned. And we've been working on this for about 5 years. So if you're looking to unify systems for your office, or if you're just starting your practice, this video is for you. Go inside the Airtable and take a look at what we're going to cover. I want this to be concise and brief, but I also want it to be comprehensive. So hopefully I can find the right balance between these. The first thing we're going to cover is navigation and structure. I'm just going to show you how this is organized. I'm going to give you a quick note about AI, just for context. Then let's talk about the interface, how you interact with the template. And with that context in place, we can talk about projects, operations, make a quick note about settings for the template, and then we can see what the next steps would be. So the first thing that you will notice is this blue sidebar on the left of the screen that has a number of icons here. So you can open or expand this sidebar by clicking here, and that's going to give you your navigation menu. You can also collapse it by clicking here again if you need more screen real estate. So if you navigate and you place your mouse on top of any of these icons, you'll see that it will open up the menu and it'll show you the name of this tab, and there's 3 pages inside. So tabs contain pages and pages contain data, which is what you work on. So you work on the pages, not on the tabs. The tabs help you keep everything organized. So if we expand this, you'll see that all these are tabs. They're not pages. So if I click on any of these, for example, in contacts, it's just automatically going to open this. There's no way to collapse a tab. You have to step outside of it. So that's why we have the welcome page at the bottom. So when we click on this, you can see the full navigation menu on the top. So that being said, let's take a look at the actual navigation menu. You'll see there's 3 sections here. You have a project section, then you have an operations section, and then you have a settings section. The project section contains everything, of course, that is related to your projects, right? The operations section contains everything that is related to running your office. It's internal to the office. And then the settings are global settings for the template so that you can adjust it to suit your own practice needs. Every practice is different, so this is where you can adjust the settings and the parameters for your practice so that you can get started with the template. I can teach you how to do that, and we can walk together through this step by step, but that's the subject for another video. So here, let's touch base on something very quickly. So what is Airtable? And Airtable is a database that looks like a spreadsheet. So this is the back end of this interface that we're looking at. And the building blocks of a database are tables. So you can see here's a table for deliverables, a table for milestones, a table for projects, and so on and so forth. And the system itself is called a base. So you have an Airtable base, and that base is made out of tables. And the beauty of this is that data in the different tables can talk to each other. A good way to visualize this data is with base schema. So a base schema is an interesting way to visualize the data. You can see here, there's all these elements. And if we zoom into any of these, for example, this one, you'll see that this corresponds to one table. So each one of these correspond to one table, and all these are fields or columns within the table. So there's 50 tables within this base. And the reason why I show you this is because over here we can also visualize the relationships that exist between tables. So let me show you what I mean. Let's take a look at this, for example. We have countries, states, and cities. And we can see here the relationship between these tables. So we can display here this relationship. So you can see here that state and country are linked in the country table and the state table, and that city and state are linked between the states table and the cities table. So if we zoom out a little bit here, we're going to look at all these different relationships between tables. And what I want to emphasize here is everything here, all these relationships in this base has been done manually. There's no AI, there's no vibe coding here. Every row, every cell, every formula, and every relationship has been built manually, very carefully over the last 5 years. This matters because the output that you're going to get from your data is going to be very consistent. It's going to be using the same criteria that's already baked into the system every single time. However, Airtable has built-in AI capabilities. It works really well, and there's a lot of potential here. But the system does not rely on AI to function. There is an internal logic to the system that is always consistent. So if you want to take this base to the next level, take AI functions and leverage into your table, this is ripe for experimentation. Right now, you're going to get consistency. You're going to get consistency and predictability in the way the system works. So I just wanted to bring that up because it's a common question that I get asked. Does it have AI? And it doesn't. And it doesn't need it. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at how we interact with the base, how the interface works. Let's just start with the deals table up here at the top. And before we talk about what the deals table is, let's take a look at the interface. And this is going to be a good example for almost all of the different tables here. So the first thing that you're going to notice here is, let's just collapse this. You're going to see the filters on the top. So we can filter here by projects, by year. This is already organized by year, but if we want to see only projects that were created in 2024. If you have different offices, you can add them here. So if you have an office in New York and in London and Paris, you can filter by office. Deal stages, probably the most useful one in this particular table. If you want to see all your prospects, you can filter by that. By type of construction. So if you want to see what are your small multifamily projects, you can see them here. By city. So if you want to see projects that are in Seattle, you can look at them here. By organization. So depending on your client, and by client contact. So the different tables have different filters depending on what purpose they're serving. And these filters make it extremely easy to find the information that you need, not only for you, but also for your team. So filters is one thing. Another thing that we should know is views. Let's talk about the view. So if we go here, you see we're in the list view. And if we click here, we can go to the grid view. And the grid view is the one that is most similar to a spreadsheet. So the grid view has three very interesting qualities. The first one is that it's great for grouping. So we are grouping here by year. If we want to group by deal stage, we can click this and see it by deal stage. And we can change the order of the items in here. So we see here by design, by proposal, by prospect, etc. So the grouping allows you to see the data that you want to see. Now, related to the grouping, and this is really, really useful, is that anytime you have a group and you have this group header row, that row is going to give you a total for all the data that is within the group. And this is dynamic. So let's take a look at this one, design, with a total of 813,000, which is the sum of all of this. And I just want to see 2025. That total is going to change. So this total that you see in the grid view is dynamic. This is very, very helpful when we're in accounting, for example. We want to filter by account or by date. The list view is a little bit different. The list view does not have this dynamic problem. The other interesting functionality of the grid view is you can batch edit. In this case, let's say you want all of these projects to change office. So you can just drag and drop. So it's very easy to batch edit when you're in grid view. In list view, you have to go one by one. Now, grid view sometimes is not as compact as the list view, which makes it a lot more interesting. And the other thing about list view, you'll see here, there's a couple more really interesting things here. One is you will be able to open up data inside the record. So if we click here, this is going to open up and we have more information. In some cases, this window can display different things. So for example, in this case, we have general information, we have payment information. Okay, this payment information is something that we use to get our clients to pay us with Stripe. We can talk about that later. And the one that is more interesting about the list view, if you remember, the base is made out of different tables. And each table, for example, the deals contains data related to deals. And we have another table, which is years. And we're getting a lot of information flowing to that years table. So the list view allows us to display information from different tables. So all this information here in this area is related to the deals table, but you see these titles here, 2025, 2024, is displaying this information from the years table. So the list view allows us to display information from two different tables in one single view. And that can be very helpful. This is a good example, the deals view, and we'll talk about it in a second. Now, there's other views like a gallery view, which is a more graphic view and is very helpful, for example, with our staff. If I go to the staff table, by default is on a gallery view. So you can see the photo of everyone and then some information associated with that. If we go back to the deals table, we also have a Kanban view. This one, I don't use it that much, to be honest. It allows you to drag the deals across the funnel, but I don't really use it that much. Some people like it. Now, finally, how do we get information in the table? And this is an important one. Whenever you have the ability to input data, you're going to be able to do it through a form. And this form is also curated to display the data that you need to input so that the system remains consistent. In this case, if we have a new deal coming in, we can add that deal here. By using forms, we control the way in which we input the information, because this is indicating everything that is required for you to input that data. We can delete records as well, and we can take this one and delete it. And finally, we also have some shortcuts. When we have certain workflows, we have included some shortcuts that help you walk through that workflow. So in this case, if we have a deal that we want to turn into a proposal, we can go here to proposals, and then we can add the proposal, and then we can go to projects. You will see the shortcuts in some cases, especially when you're doing your staffing plan and your financial plan. You're going to see these workflows that remind you which step should be done next. For navigation and interface, we have the main menu on the left sidebar. We have the filters on the top. We have the different views here. We have the forms to add data. And we have some shortcuts in some cases. So with this, we have talked about the navigation and the structure of the base. You now know how Airtable kind of behaves at a high level. So it's a base, and that base is made out of tables. And those tables have fields, and those fields can talk to each other. We also know this doesn't have any AI. So the output that you get is just based on the internal logic that has been created within the system. So with that said, let's just take a quick tour of the project section and go through each one of these tables one by one. Let's take a look at the project section of the template. And this section has some core functionality, which is captured in the following tabs: in the deals, projects, milestones, and deliverables. So as a possible project or an opportunity comes into the office, it becomes a deal. And then that deal will become an active project in the system when we send a proposal to our client and that proposal is accepted. At the moment in which there's a formal agreement, that deal becomes an active project. And that active project is made out of milestones, and those milestones are made out of deliverables. So deliverables are the building block for projects. Deliverables also happen to be the building block for invoices as well. So adjacent to that, adjacent to our projects, milestones, and deliverables, we have invoices, our staff and team, resources utilization. We have files, timesheets, agreements, and project templates. Deliverables also happen to be the building block for invoices. With that, let's just go ahead and take a look at each one of these tables one by one. We have other videos where we dive deep into each one of these tables, but for now, let's just keep it at a high level discussion. So let's start with Deals tab. And in here, you're going to see 4 tables. We have deals by default. So again, this is where every opportunity that comes into the office gets registered in the system. And this is where we manage our business development efforts. If a new deal comes in, we add it through the form. And then we can keep control of our ongoing deals through these tables. This one is organizing by year, which we find is very, very useful. We can filter by stage, or we can filter by any of these other attributes. We have another view here, which by default is displaying information organized by stage. This is really helpful when you're trying to see how many proposals you have active and how many prospects you have active and which are the projects that you need to follow up on. Then we have a proposals table. And this is a special table. There's a lot of information inside here. It doesn't look like it, but this is how we turn a deal into a project, into an active project. We go through the proposals table and create a proposal. There's a lot of information that we can customize in the proposals. I'm going to take a quick peek here. So to look at the proposals, we're going to go inside the record, and we're going to use this little window here that we discussed before. So I'm going to click here, and this is going to open an interface that we use mainly for proposals. So this is how we structure the projects. What you see here now is the final result after creating a proposal. And it's going to display some general project information, including fee, start date, and duration. It's going to have a project description. This, we want to make it as detailed as possible. We're going to have milestones. We're going to have key dates. We're going to have meetings. We're going to have a payment schedule. And then you also have a complete scope of work outlined here for your client. This is the final version. So when you create a proposal, this is the output of that proposal. One final note about the proposals: we have different windows within this interface to prepare the proposal, to customize it, and to coordinate it. So for example, you have project fees, duration, staff. So if you look at the project staff, this is how the staff is arranged during the proposal creation process. And this is the information that's going to go into the projects. Our resources and utilization is going to reflect this information. While the proposal creation process allows you to really customize and fine-tune the project requirements, the creation process is very simple. I'm not going to go through it in this video, but I'm just going to give you a summary of this. You have to choose 3 things. You have to choose the start date, you have to choose a proposal fee, and then you have to choose the scope. And that scope is going to come from our project templates, which live over here. And the goal here is that when you create those project templates, they are as detailed as possible so that when you create the project, you have the least amount of customization to do. That you can adjust timeline, you can adjust fees, you can adjust duration of milestones, but the scope of work is already set up for you. That being said, let's keep going through our system. The next table is payment information. Essentially what it is a payment link in Stripe. So we can take a look at it here. You can send this invoice to your clients in different ways, but essentially they have a link for their project and they can pay you with Stripe without you having to leave Airtable. So the next step after deals is projects. So let's move on to a projects table now. So when we step in the projects table, we're going to see 4 different pages. The first one shows general information about the projects. And this table allows you to open each record similar to the proposals table. So if I step over here, we're going to also go to this view. So you can take a look at the overall project scope at a glance in one single place. But the reality is we want to take a look at the milestones, for example, the milestones table, because it has a lot more information. So we'll take a look at this in a second. So we have this main view for projects. There's also an accounting view for projects, which is over here, projects accounting. And this is going to give you a high level overview of the financial status of each project. And it's going to give you a % complete. So you know where each project is in terms of progress. So this is going to display your design fee, % complete, earned amounts, hourly amounts, discounts, earned after discounts, project expenses, additional services, invoiced amounts, paid amounts, amounts due, amounts overdue, and backlog, which are fees that you have not yet earned. We also have a project schedule. This allows us to have a very condensed view of the schedule in a very graphic interface. Clients like to see this one, so I tend to take a screenshot of this and share it with them when we're discussing schedule. You can also expand on any of these milestones and see what tasks are within that milestone. And then if you click on it, you can also see some more information about that task. So this is a graphic way to see the scope of work. If you expand everything, you can print this for your clients in a PDF format. And this is all generated from that proposal. So once you finish the proposal, this is ready for you. So everything is connected. Then we also have contracts. And for projects that we have already created, we have the contracts here for reference. So you could open up here and you're going to see the language of the contract that was accepted. If you have a signed agreement like a PDF, you can upload it here for reference. Our agreements live over here. We're going to take a look at this in a few minutes. But this lives here for reference. It makes sense that there's a contracts page within the project. So if you're working on a project, you want to consult the contract, you can just take a look at it here very quickly. So this is our projects table. Then we're going to go to milestones. So to go to our milestones, we're going to go here to this tab. And it's going to open up two pages. One is our default page and the other one is for phase scope. We'll take a look at this in a second. Let's expand here. So milestones is where we manage the project at a high level. This is where we control fee, scope, and timeline. In particular, timeline works really well. We control the start date of the project at the project level. So if we change the start date of the project, everything slides. But we control the duration of the project at the milestone level, and we do it by week. So let's take a look at this one, for example. We have 34 weeks of duration for design phase, and each milestone has a specific duration. So right now, our percent complete shows that we're currently in permit phase, and we have realized that we're going to take more time in interior. So let's change this from 6 weeks to 12 weeks. And you'll see these numbers change and the duration of week change, but you're also going to notice something else. So let's change this here. So now all these numbers changed and the start and end weeks changed and the duration in weeks changed. You also have a warning here, duration change, and an invoice status is now waiting. So remember when I said that deliverables were the building blocks for milestones and for invoices? Well, as I changed the duration of the milestones, all of my deliverables have a due date, and that due date is determined relative to the milestone duration. So when I change the duration of my milestones, all my deliverables slide. So now to reconcile the new duration with the invoicing process, we're going to click here and we're going to update this timeline. So this is in the background, is going to reset all of these elements. You can see it doing it here. It is reviewing the timeline, and once it is complete, it's going to start relinking the invoices, and it's going to tell you how many are remaining. So we just changed the duration of the project very quickly by changing the weeks here, and everything got coordinated. You coordinated deliverable due dates, you coordinated invoices, you coordinated the duration, the overall duration of the project, and then you coordinated the start and end date of the milestones. So this is just an example of how we can work with the milestones to manage our project. The important thing to note here is the milestones give you a true big picture, high level view with enough detail so that you know exactly where the project stands, so you can keep your team and your client in alignment. This is filtered by project, but if we clear this, you can also see all your projects. And this is just great because we can sit down for 15 minutes and review everything that we have going on in the office. We have the opportunity in the proposals to create projects that are phased. So the other view that we have is dedicated to phased milestones, and is going to group milestones within each phase. So we can have phase 1, which is from start through permits, and then phase 2 could be interiors and materials, and phase 3 could include construction documents and construction. So we use this typically when it's either a large project like master plan and then concept and then schematic design, where the client is not really sure where the things are going to go forward, or in smaller projects like a single family home where the client is maybe a little bit apprehensive of the full commitment, so we can break the scope. The interesting thing here is that by doing it in the grid view, we can see the totals for each phase. This is a nice view to see the progress based on phases. And then after milestones, we have deliverables, which, as I said, are the building block for both milestones and invoices. So let's take a look at this. So for deliverables, let's head over to the tab here marked as 130 deliverables, and we're going to open this and we're going to see 6 different views for deliverables. The first one, which is the default view, is organized by milestone. And you can see here this first project that appears is 100% complete. So let's take a look at a project that is not yet complete. So let's go to our Ravenna home example project, which is what we were looking at. And this project is currently in milestone number 6. So let's filter by milestone here. So let's do milestone 6, 7, 8, or 9. And now we have the work plan for this project at a deliverable level in our screen. So all these deliverables, they come from the project template and they have predetermined due dates. The due dates are relative to the milestone duration. So if you change the duration of the milestones, the due dates for these deliverables are going to change. So to mark a deliverable complete, assign a complete date. So in this case, if the deliverable is due on 9/26, we can say this is complete on 9/26, and now it is going to be marked as complete. So to avoid having to browse for dates every time, what we do to mark this is we just click in here. We mark it as complete over here. And once this is marked, it's going to take this value and it's going to paste it here. So by default, when a task is completed, it's going to be completed on the due date. So to mark deliverables as complete, you mark them here. And this does 2 things. You'll see here the milestone % complete is adjusted. I can keep doing this here. And now this % complete is also going to be adjusted. If I go to the milestones table, that this project is on milestone number 7. And you'll now see that interiors is in progress, is 38% complete, and you have earned fees of 5,394 out of 14,160 for this milestone. Let's go back to the deliverables. As you notice, this is doing 2 things. It's updating the milestones table, but it's also updating the earned fees, which are coming from the invoices. As I said before, deliverables are the building block for invoices and for milestones. A task that is not started is going to be marked to do. Let's take a look at this example of a proposal that has everything pending. So all tasks here are to do. And this is not something that you can choose to change. This is a formula. So let's go back to our Ravenna. So how are we marking tasks and in progress? And the answer to this is on the timesheet. So when somebody has already logged in time against a given task, it goes from to do to in progress because people are working on it. So let's take a look at this one, for example. Let's take a look at task 720 of milestone 7 of Ravenna Park. Let's just make a quick detour to our timesheets. We're going to see here by milestone, filter by Ravenna, and let's take a look at that task 720 and let's see this. Okay, so there's 2 entries against this task. One is for 6 hours and the other one is for 4 hours and 45 minutes by Noah and Zoe. So this task is technically in progress because people are already working on this. Of course, we have provided a lot of dummy data for this. We loaded a lot of timesheet data here to illustrate this. And this is showing tasks in progress as far as March 2026. So this is probably not reflective of a real scenario, but you can ignore this for now. The point is that if nothing has been done on a task, it is marked as to do. If you have completed the task and it has a date complete, it is marked as complete. And if there is time logged against a given task, it's going to be marked as in progress. Now, there's a lot of project management software that assigns each task a responsible person. This is not the way this is done here. For example, if you have a permit progress set, you might have one person that's in charge of reviewing it, but you're likely going to have multiple people working on it. You're going to have designers, project manager reviewing it. You're going to have a principal taking a look at it. So this is created in a way that multiple people can log time to the same task. The way this is implemented in the day-to-day is for each milestone, you can assign a person who's going to be in charge of developing that particular task, working with their team, but there's going to be one person who's going to be championing that task. And then there's a project manager who's going to review those tasks and they're going to determine they're complete. So when the project manager determines that any given task is complete, he can mark as complete. Now let's talk about dates for the tasks. When we create the proposal, all these dates come from the template. but sometimes tasks get delayed. So you can adjust the date of a task. So for example, let's say this one, room data sheets, you could push this out by 4 weeks. Let's take a look at the due date here. So if I push this out by 4 weeks, it's gonna change the date. So we have other views for tasks. A very useful one is deliverables by project. And this does not group the deliverables within milestones or invoices or dates or anything like that. It just shows you all the tasks that you have in the office. And you can filter this by status, for example. You can see what is to do. So you can see which tasks remain to be done. You can also filter by due, which is very helpful. And you can see which ones are due this week, last week, or next week, for example. Once you have this, you can also filter by lead. Any given person in the office is going to be able to quickly take a look at what they need to work on this week or last week, or what they're going to have to work on next week. So this is very helpful to keep your team aligned. Then we have deliverables by invoice. And to explain deliverables by invoice, let me go to the accounting view of this. So you'll see here that each one of these deliverables has a value. So there's a planned fee that corresponds to each one of these. So if you look at 3D models, it has a planned fee, it has an earned fee, which is usually going to be the same if you're billing on a % complete, but if you're billing hourly, this may differ. It's going to show you the hours that you had planned for that task and the hours logged against that task, the cost of the work, and the profit to date. So in this case, you logged less hours than you had planned, so you made a profit. But in this one, you lost $2,000. And if you look at here, the hours, you had 15 hours planned for this, but you logged 44 hours. So you logged in almost 3 times as much as hours planned. So that means that your cost of the work ballooned, and then you're losing money. Now, there's so many hours here that most of these hours are probably by junior staff, so they're not hours that are as expensive as principals, but this is something that you might want to check in with your team and see what happened. Did we plan incorrectly? Did this task actually need 44 hours so that we could change it in the template and plan better next time? Or did we deal with some unforeseen external circumstances that require that we spend a lot more time here? Or did we just simply mess it up? This is good if you want to just take a deep dive into the performance and just see at a very granular level how each task was performed by your team. Of course, you can go into the timesheets and see who worked on this and who spent time doing what. So the answers might be there. They might have added notes about what happened. But this is what this gives you. It gives you a lot more detail on the task. This data is also, of course, going to travel through the system into our performance and transactions and realized revenue and realization rate and all this stuff. What I wanted to show you originally was the planned fee. So each task has an amount that is going to be worth. As a task is complete, it gets assigned to an invoice, and that value is added to the invoice. So that's how we bill on % complete. So as deliverables are marked as complete, they are linked to the appropriate invoice based on the completion date. Okay. So if you go here to see deliverables by invoice, this is going to be filtering every task based on their planned invoice date. And this is a good way to keep your team aligned, because if today is September 10, and the next invoicing period is September 25th, you might want to have a conversation with your team and say, these are the tasks that we need to focus on so that we can actually bill for what we're planning to bill in the next invoice to our client. And then we have 2 views for planning deliverables. So these are used more when you create a proposal for your project, and you have to make adjustments to the information that comes directly from the template. So for example, you need to add new deliverables, or you need to change the dates and duration. So this field of milestone position is what determines the due date of the task or deliverable relative to the duration of the milestone. So for example, in this case, we have a duration of 8 weeks for this milestone, and this task is due at 25%. That's due on week 2, and that's what your due date is going to reflect, because that's the milestone start date. If I was to change the duration in weeks of this milestone, let's say now this is going to be 24. Now all of this changes, all these due date change, but the task retains its positions. Task for 10, that's still due at 25% of the milestone. At 25% of the milestone is now 6 weeks. So the due date changed. If I change this to 16, all of these dates are going to change again. So this allows us to control the timeline of the milestones at the milestone table, how I showed you, and all the deliverables are going to self-adjust. Now, if you do want to change the deliverable itself, you can change this. So for example, you can change floor plan options and you can say this is going to be due at 50%. And now that's going to show you that this is going to be due on week 8. So this is meant to be done at the beginning of the project when you're looking at your scope. The fee for the task is also changed here. There's a relative complexity. It's going to take the overall design fee of the milestone. It's going to calculate it as 100% and determine its weight percentage within the milestone, which is going to in turn determine the fee. A good way to illustrate this is to assign a new task. Let's add a task between 4:20 and 4:30 here. So we're going to add a deliverable. Deliverable number will be 21. And let's say rendering. I'm going to leave the relative complexity empty and I'm going to do the milestone position at 50%. So here it is, 421 is renderings, 3D models do at 30% and renderings is at 50%. Now you'll see here that this task is worth 0, but there is a complexity to it. So maybe it's not as complex as the 3D models, but it does require some hours and some work. So I'm gonna put a complexity somewhere here and you're gonna see all the weights and all the fees self-adjust, but the totals are gonna remain the same. So now this task is worth 2,000. If I move this up here, it's gonna adjust as well. If all of these are the same weight, that means that all of the tasks have the same complexity and they're all gonna be worth exactly the same. So this is how we coordinate the value of tasks. It's relative to the milestone fee. So we can adjust overall fees for the project at the project level, at the milestone level, and then for deliverables, we can assign a relative complexity that will help us determine the fee for each task. Finally, the other planning view for these deliverables is by invoice. So these allow us to see how much we're going to be billing on every invoice based on the amount that each task is worth. So if all of these tasks that we have planned to be billed on December 10th are completed on time, then that's going to be the amount that you're going to be including in your invoice. Again, the planning views are meant for you to prepare the scope of work and the fees of the project at the proposal level. Most of the times, I don't even touch this because the templates are very well calibrated. But if you need to, this is where you can really calibrate the way in which your deliverables are going to be planned for your project. So this is for our deliverables page. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our invoices page. So to head over to the invoices tab, we're going to go over here. And with this, we have finished an overview of the core functionality of the project section. So that's going to give you a good understanding of how the template is working. The remaining tables, we can probably do a quick pass because they're pretty self-explanatory. So let's start with the invoices. I'm going to expand here for clarity. So the first page, which is the default, is arranging invoices by project and is going to give you a pretty detailed summary of all the elements. As with any other table, you can use the filters, so you can filter by status if you want. And of course, you can easily navigate through all your projects and easily take a look at the status of the invoicing for each one. Now you have other views. Well, the next one is invoices by status. And this is going to be grouped, of course, by status. So you have invoices that are due soon, ready to send, invoices that are overdue, and invoices that are paid. This is dynamic. So right now you have a total amount of 62,000 for invoices that are overdue. And let's suppose they paid you this invoice. So that number is going to change and that record is going to move to paid invoices. Then we have two tables that are very important. And these are the earned fees and the projected fees. Earned fees at any point in time is everything that you have already completed and it's in the past. This is going to show you every task that was completed already. And then it's going to group it by invoice. So it's going to tell you which invoice was sent and what were the amounts that were included in that invoice. So this is a really good way to check the amounts that you're invoicing your client. So now let's look at our projected fees, which is the opposite of this. Is every task that is not yet completed and how we're projecting that into the future. So the projected fees are going to tell us what the amount of the next invoice is going to be based on what you're planning to complete. Earned fees and projected fees are great to see what you have built up to this date and how you're projecting your fees in the next few months. So it's a really good way to keep your clients up to date. And then finally, there's two other lightweight tables, which are work completed by milestone. So this is a better way to update your client. I prefer not to share all the details of the amounts for each task, because then there's going to start asking a bunch of questions, and it's going to be a very good comparison because this is what your scope is saying. And then the other table that is like this is the work that has been completed, but this time is grouped by invoice. So this is very helpful if you want to see which tasks were completed by a given date and to which invoice they belong. Then we have team planning. Team includes our extended project team, so outside of the office, and then it includes our project staff, which is the internal team. In the context of this conversation, project team, table 151, is your external team. So when you create the proposal and the project, you're going to have the chance to select which consultants and which team participants you think are going to be necessary for the project, and it's going to create these records. And as you move through the project, as the project progresses, and let's say you bring a land surveyor, you can select a land surveyor from here, and the project contact is going to be this person, and the coordinator from our office is going to be this person. And if there's a consultant proposal, you can attach it here. And if there's a fee for that consultant, you can type it in here. If you have any notes, of course, you can put them in here. And if the contract, sometimes consultants are hired by the owner and sometimes are hired by the architect. So you can specify this here. So you can say this is a consultant that is hired by the owner. So this is for reference. But if this is by the architect, you might need to include this amounts in your invoices as the consultant bills you, and you need to bill your client as a reimbursable things. As the project goes on, you keep filling in these blanks. And you'll see here that as you select arborist, as you select the organization, it's only going to bring in arborists. Of course, these are all fake organizations, but it's good to illustrate the point. So you can choose this one. And then if you have a structural engineer, you can choose from organizations that are structural engineers. This is organized in our contacts tab. We can see an example of what a project would look like when it's completed. So if anyone in the team is asking who is the structural engineer and who is the contact, everything is here. The consultant proposal will be living here, and the consultant fee is here. So you can really keep tabs on everyone that's involved in the project. Then we have the project staff, which is the staff from your office that's going to be working on this project. Then you have your project staff, and this is essentially the roster for your project. And this is coming directly from your project templates and included in your proposal. You can modify this. You can add staff to an active project, and you can change people for any given role. So you can modify this and customize it, but every project has its own roster. So it's taking people from your staff and saying, this is the acting principal for this project. This is going to be the project manager for this job. This is going to be the project architect. And then we have assignments for the project. And again, this is organized when we create our proposal. So the way this works is for each milestone, we create a mini team for that milestone. Let's isolate a couple of these milestones to see an example. So let's take milestone number 3 and milestone number 7. And let's see, concept. So the principal, maybe it's very hands-on principle. So it's going to be very much dedicated to this phase, which is concept design. Then the project manager is going to be supporting that. The project architect is going to be available, but probably not very busy in the project. And the designer is going to be starting to do some work. Maybe they're going to be setting up drawings, zoning plans, and things like that. So this is going to determine the hours that each staff has available to work on this project per milestone. The designer has 24 hours per milestone and is 3 weeks. So this designer is going to be working on these 8 hours per week. So then this is going to translate into utilization, and it's going to translate ultimately into the fee per staff per milestone. The beauty of this is that it works like an equalizer. So you can adjust visually the relative dedication for each staff and the hours per milestone, and ultimately the fee per staff and the hours per week. They're going to self-balance without changing the design fee. So you can manage the utilization and deployment of your staff without affecting milestone duration fees. Let's make an example here. Let's say the principal is not going to be running the concept designs. It's probably going to be more overseeing this and doing client contract work. So maybe there's a hands-off principle, and maybe the project manager is the person who's going to be working on this more, and the project manager is going to help. So now all this has changed. The fee per staff has changed, but the design fee remains the same. Now, if we look at interiors, this could be a pretty reasonable distribution of work for interiors phase. The principal is very high level, just reviewing the work. Project manager has some involvement. Then the project architect and the designer, they're busier. The designer in particular, because interiors is very labor intensive. Now notice that if I move the principal hours here, everything's going to change, but the total design fee is going to remain. Essentially, for each template, we have a milestone and we have the relative dedication that we think would work for that milestone. So when you create a project, it brings that information in. If you need to go in here and change it, you can, but we usually stay away from this team planning unless there's something in particular that we need to look into. Then we also have bottom-up assignments. I don't have an example here, and I have a separate video for this, so we'll leave this for another video. And then the next one is the resource heat map, which I love it. It's a beautiful table. This really shows us how busy everybody is. And what we want to aim for is avoid purple ones, because the purple is about 40 hours per week. Now, it depends also on what your target utilizations are. For example, if your principal utilization is going to be 50% of the time, you want to have this person probably in the light green shade, which is about 50%. So let's just do an example here. Let's say Ethan, let's take a look at this week. So he's at 44 hours. So he's a little bit overworked this week. So let's open up and see what he's working on. So he's got 9 hours on this project, 10 hours on this, 8 and 4 hours here. So maybe let's see Mercer Flats. What's the phase? So he's at the tail end of design for Mercer Flats. So maybe we can get Claire to help on this project. So let's go to our staff page and go to Mercer Flats. So we go to staff page, Mercer Flats. Now let's change our designer on this project from Ethan to Claire. So let's just change this here and get Claire in here. And let's go back to the heat map and let's see how this updates by itself. So we're looking at, there it is. So this is updating in real time. So now the week of August 4th, Ethan is at 36 hours and now Claire is at 12 hours. So now let's see. So that managed to fix this. Let's take a look at this one. Maybe Ravenna, we can get Claire to help with Ravenna as well. So we go to our project staff table and we go to Ravenna. And maybe we also move from Ethan to Claire and we go back to our heat map. And now this is gonna start updating again. So this is still overutilized here, but we were able to clear out all of this just by changing the project roster. You can also go in and start changing the relative dedication, but the best way to do that is just by assigning the right person to the right team. So let's take a look at our files now. So that's here in this tab. And it's going to open up a few different pages. They are all displaying the same information. It's just different formats and it's just options for you depending on what you prefer. This is essentially a catalog of documents that are related to each project. There is one single point of intake, which is this form over here. So if you need to add a file, you can add it through here. You can select your project. Who is it from? You can specify the contents, add any notes, who is uploading this information. And here's a couple of items to note. First, a status, whether it's for reference or if it needs an action. So any files that are tagged with an action, these are files that need some sort of follow-up. And then a storage type. So most of the files are going to be living in the Airtable in the system. So you can add an attachment here. Or if you have something like site photos, drone footage, or Revit models or ArchiCAD models, you can just choose to add them to an external site and just paste the link here. So it's up to you. And then you have tags. So if you want to tag a given file with a number of tags. So this file is for schematic design, but also for your pre-application meeting. And then also for permit submission. A good example of this is geotechnical report, right? It's used for all these three. You can do that as well. So once you add a file, it has all these attributes that make it very easy to find in the base for anybody in the team. So you could filter here by project. So let's say Ravenna Park Home, and you could filter here by tags. And then you have every file that is related to the permit submission. You can also filter by the origin of the file, and then by project. And then you can always open up a record. So let's try this one. And you're going to be able to see the attachments here. And then if you click on one of these attachments, you can download it and save it. There are also ways to share this with your clients on a project by project basis. But this is going to be a separate video. So for the other views, you can see it here by date. So this simply arranges one single list of files by date. This sometimes is a cleaner way to filter. So maybe you can choose a project here. And if you want to see it by tag, say permit submission, it's going to be a single, more condensed list of the files that are associated with this submission or with this tag. So I personally like these two, project files or project files by date, but then you also have gallery. The gallery has an image that is displayed as the header. And this can be hard to navigate, but if you have filters applied, it works pretty well. So if you have like this one, and then you want to filter by structural, then this becomes a lot more manageable because you can easily browse through just a few files and not through a whole catalog. And then we have cards, and the way this is arranged is each horizontal band is a project, but then each vertical band is a different participant of the project. So let's filter by project. So over here, and then you can see here that you have owner, architect, and you can keep scrolling, and you're going to be able to see all the participants that have provided files to this. So it's a different way to see it. Again, it's also powerful if you have tags, so it gives you a better sense of what's included just in a very quick view. It depends on your preference. I like to use the standard view and the date view because it makes it simpler for me, but it is up to you. Then we have timesheets. So let's go over to time entries here. Timesheets, they're arranged by milestones, so you can keep track of how much time you spent on each milestone, but the one that is used the most is by invoice. And timesheets by invoice, of course, they display all the time entries that have been done against a given invoice period. So sometimes you don't have an amount due hourly because you're billing by percent complete. So you still want to be tracking time against those tasks because that's going to go through the system into your operations. It's going to help you to measure utilization. It's going to help you to measure your realization rate. It's going to help you check against your profit plan. So all this information is very good data for your business. But when you have tasks that you are billing hourly, this becomes very helpful because you can filter here by hourly on call, for example. And then you have a couple of projects. Let's take a look at this one. So heritage. So you'll see that for each invoice, let's take a look at this one, for example, invoice number 12. You have the invoice, and then you have the person who made this entry. You have the date of the entry. You have the milestone. In this case, it's construction administration. You have the deliverables, the hours worked, hourly rate, and then the amount due. And then you have the total hourly amount due for this invoice and the total so far for the project. And you have notes here. So these are mandatory when you make a time entry. So you know for every entry what was done. So if your client asks you for backup of this hourly amount, it's right here. It's very easy to retrieve. These notes are empty because we just loaded a bunch of timesheet data and we didn't put notes on that. But if we were to make a new time entry, which is in this form, by default, it's going to have today's date, and then you're going to have hours worked. It's done in 15-minute increments. So let's say this, and then you're going to have a test. Let's do something on this project. So heritage homes, milestones would be construction administration, and deliverables would be, let's say, change order review. And for assignments, let's do more hours here. Let's do 3:30. So you noticed here that as I choose the project, it brings me the milestones for that project only. And then as I choose the milestones, it brings me the deliverables for that project for me to choose from. And then the assignments of that person for that milestone. You'll see here M11, that means milestone 11, designer Ethan. So this is how you make the timesheets work. So then you create this. So here is that entry. So 330, and that would be on the same invoice that we're displaying. And there's the description. So test, and then that amount changed as well. Let's expand here. So we have timesheets by milestone, and this is grouped by milestone and displayed on a chronological order. So it's displayed on the order in which the entries are made. By invoice, which we just discussed, which are great to provide backup information to your clients if you're billing them hourly. And then by task, which is similar to milestone. They're not displayed in chronological order, they're displayed by task. And this is also helpful if you want to see what's going on with any given task, how much hours have been billed against it, and who's been working on it. Okay, and then we have agreements. So you remember in our proposals, we have a client exhibit. We have some agreement templates. Let's start here. So you have a few templates. You can have as many as you want. So you have a demo agreement, or you can have a demo agreement number 2. Maybe you have one for single family homes, and then you have another one for master plans, and then you have another one for hourly consulting, and so on and so forth. So you have different agreement templates, and then you can edit those templates here. You can edit the language of the template. So to create an agreement, I go here to agreement creation, and then you can choose which type of agreement you're going to create. So let's say demo agreement, and here you choose which project. So I'm going to choose Praxis residence, but this already has an agreement. So as I choose it, it's going to tell me, hold on, you already created an agreement for this. You cannot create again. But I know we have another proposal in the works, which is called Vista View Estates. And then this one can be created. So this is bringing in the information from the template that you loaded here. And then if you're okay with this, you can just hit create. And it's going to run a small automation. It's going to create an agreement for this project. And that agreement is going to be found here in agreements. And then we can come here and open it up. And it's going to be a proposal of design services with the date we want to assign. By default, is today's date. It shows the project, the address, the client, and the client email. And then it shows you all the language from the template that you chose. It's included here, but you can edit this. So if you need to edit any of the language for this particular project, you can edit here. It's not going to affect the template. The interesting thing about this is that these agreements, the way we're using them, we're referring to the client exhibit. So the fee structure, scope, milestones, timeline, they refer to the client exhibit. The scope of services is going to be as per the client exhibit. The schedule is going to be as per the client exhibit. The start date is per the client exhibit. The fees and the payments and the payment schedule by the client exhibit. So as soon as we create a proposal where we're outlining the time and duration and fees and milestones and scope of work and all of that stuff that we saw in the proposals video, same time, we can just create an agreement with literally 2 clicks if we have the template in place. And this agreement is going to refer that client exhibit so that we don't have to rewrite everything every time. So it's been a huge time saver. You can see all of the agreements that have been created. For example, for this one, we can see it's for that Newport Sales residence that is using this agreement. And then we have project templates as well. And these are, of course, the lifeblood of this system, because we create a template and then we can use it and reuse it many times to create our projects and our milestones and our deliverables and our staffing. And then that's going to be using information from the system to also create the utilization and the resources and all this stuff. So we have different project types. If you want to add a new project type, you can just choose this one and replicate. And that's going to create a copy here. And you'll see here, there's creating the milestones. And now it's going to be creating the deliverables. It's going to take a couple minutes. So there's 70 deliverables here. So this is duplicating this template. And I can open up here and I can change this. So I can say special project. So then we have this template and we can edit it. So we could select this to focus on. And then we're going to go to our milestones. And these are the milestones for special projects. So I can change this. You can add milestones. You can delete milestones. Once you assign all these attributes, you move on to the deliverables template. Here is where you make sure each of the milestones has the deliverables that you need. And then in the assignments table, you're going to see what is the staff that is assigned by default to the template that you're creating. So now that template becomes available for you to use when you create a project. So you can spend half hour, an hour creating a template and adjusting it for a new project type, and then you can use it and reuse it many, many times. So this concludes our project section overview. Now let's talk about the operations section. There's a lot less complexity on the operations section. So hopefully it'll be very quick and then we can wrap it up. So we're going to talk about the operations section now, but I forgot to mention something. Unlike the settings tab, which is a placeholder tab, it doesn't have anything in it, and the operations tab, which is also a placeholder tab, the projects tab actually holds some information. It has a deals dashboard. It has a projects dashboard. It has a financial dashboard with income and expenses and annual budgets. It has a sales dashboard, my favorite. And over here we have this number, which is the sales pace. And this is going to tell you if the number is above 1, if you're ahead of schedule in your sales, or if it's below 1, that means that you're falling behind. So this is a really good one that we consult all the time, almost every day. Then we have a deliverables dashboard. And then we have a timeline. And this is a little bit different from the project schedule table, which we have under the projects tab. This is meant to see everything at the same time. We're now getting to the operations section of our tour of the template. So let's just get started with our contacts tab. And this includes contacts, which is people, and then includes organizations and interaction. Contacts is exactly what it sounds like. You can see it here. It's a directory of people that is associated with the office. So as we add a contact through the form, we have the ability to add certain information, including language, source of that contact, and contact owner. More importantly, we have the ability to add an organization. So it's very important to keep each contact with an organization. For an interesting thing here is you can also apply the filter. So you can filter by organization and see who is associated with this. You can also filter by organization category or by organization type, which are two tiers that we use to organize organizations. By default, we have this arranged by first initial, but you can arrange this however you want. Then we have organizations, which are companies or businesses. It's a directory of companies that we do business with or we're somehow associated with. And all fall within one of these three fields: design, construction, and administration. So design-related organizations are usually consultants and people that are in the project team and that are part of the projects. Then we have construction-related organizations, which are trades, construction trades. So we don't necessarily contract with them, but it's good to have these contacts in our system. And then we also have admin organizations, which are business development and consultants for the office, like accountants. So of course we can filter here by any of these criteria. So we can filter, for example, by structural engineers, and it's going to show us all the structural engineers that are in the system. And if we want to further refine this, we can filter by tags. So if we want to see, for example, who is an expert in custom residential projects, we can filter here by tag. Is going to bring us here the company that fits that criteria, and is going to show us the contact as well. And then we have interactions. And this is a lightweight CRM. It's not something super sophisticated by any means, but it is very helpful. So, for example, we have this interaction scheduled for a couple of weeks from now, I think. So, for example, we have this interaction scheduled for next week, I think. So we can say interactions due this week and next week. So we have these two, and then we can follow up with this. So we can follow up with area Burgess and say, okay, we followed up on email, and this was a check-in, and we can add any note here. Response was positive. If there's any attachments, we can include them here. And then we can plan the next one. So we can say we want to plan the next interaction for maybe before Thanksgiving. So let's say on the 17th. And then it's going to be created. We'll unfilter this in a second. And then same with this. And then we're going to schedule the next interaction, which is going to be maybe early next year. Now, if we unfilter this, now you have this planned interaction. So you can also filter, for example, by all interactions that are planned, and you're typically just going to see one per person. So this helps you keep your business development efforts organized. And the way we differentiate between what goes here and what goes in the deals table is if there is a project with a project address and a property, that goes in the deals table. If it is business development, you're meeting people, you're maintaining relationships, you're nurturing contacts, it goes here. One interesting thing here is that, well, this is an Airtable, but you might be communicating on email. And if you use Gmail, you can go here to your inbox. So I can click here. I'm going to see all the messages that are coming from Area Burgues. And of course, this person doesn't exist in reality, so there's no messages here, but it is going into my email. So I can really quickly take a look at this. And there is a formula here that you can use to do this. And I can show you how to set this up in a separate video, but I thought that was an interesting thing. I don't know if it works with Outlook or other email providers, but if you're using Gmail, this will work. Then let's talk about staff and software. Staff, of course, is your team in the office. So the first page here is a very telling page of each one of your staff and some information associated with them. Then you have a directory of your staff, which is the same information, but this is in a list view. I'm going to tell you who is in the payroll system. So the way this works is we have this directory, and the way this works, to explain it briefly, is we have this team of people, right? But they're in the directory, but they're not necessarily active in our payroll. So we add them to a payroll on a year-by-year basis. So we have a payroll planner to do that, and I'll walk you through this in another video. Then we have a staffing schedule, which tells us when these people are employed. So for example, Zoe here in 2024 is not working in October, November, and December. That means that her full-time equivalency is 0.75, and our numbers of full-time equivalents for the entire office this year was 3.8. So that's their schedule for the year, their availability for the year. Then we have compensation, which is where we assign base salaries, and then we compute that against their full-time equivalency, capacity, target utilization, and that gives us our hours for the year and the actual salary expense for the year. The base salary and the actual salary expense might differ depending on their full-time equivalency. Then we have a payroll plan, and this is very valuable data. So once you have this and you have also created a profit plan, you're going to have all the information that you need. You have direct labor, indirect labor, you have your profit target, you have break-even rate, break-even cost, overhead rate, billable hours, realizable revenue, realizable profit, realized revenue, and then you have revenue progress for the office and also for each one of your team members, calendar progress, and then revenue pace, how efficient they are in achieving their revenue target. Are they ahead of schedule or are they behind? We can see all the years for payroll. See here, there's an ID, a payroll ID. So Zoe for 2024 is different from Zoe for 2025, but they're both linked to the same staff member who is Zoe here. We take that person from our directory and then assign that person to our payroll record on a yearly basis. And we create our payroll records based on that. Part of the reason is organization of but part of it is actually practical because maybe the salary changes year over year, right? So this allows us for some flexibility in that sense. Then we have a summary here of staff rates for overhead rate, break-even rate, billable rate, the calculated billable rate, and then if you want to override it, and then the actual billable rate that we're going to be using. So if you override this to say 200, the billable rate here is going to be 200. That's going to be used in all the calculations. Then we have a summary of salaries on a monthly basis and on a yearly basis. So let's talk about software. And the purpose of our software tab is to create a budget for software for the year. And we have a specific tab that is dedicated to this because Software depends on many things that vary widely. So first, it depends on how many people you have in the office, and if you add or remove people, then the software requirements are going to change. The ways in which we pay for software vary. So some of them are on a monthly basis, some of them are on a yearly basis, some of them are paid randomly, like every 3 months. So it gets really hard to keep track of software costs. I'm going to walk you through this very quickly. I'm not going to explain every detail of how we do this. We have a separate video for that. So the first page is the software catalogs, where we loading possible software application that we might want to consider using. So this is the software stack for the office once you have marked it here as in use. Then you have a software planner that I'll show you how to use later, that assigns that stack to a given year. Then you have a software costs page. What we do here is we determine for each program how much is the annual cost per seat. Now we're using some random numbers here. These are not real costs. So you can specify here what's the cost per year, the frequency for the subscription, the payments per year, amount per payment, and also when those payments are made to be done. Because maybe you started a yearly subscription for Zoom, for example, and that's due in April. And then you started a yearly subscription for Revit, and that's due in October. It just gets really hard to keep track of it, and the amounts may vary widely. So you want to make sure you get that into your budget as accurately as possible so you can plan for it. Then you have a summary of licenses. So how many people you have on payroll, how many license slots you have, and then how many licenses you actually have active, and whether you have created those licenses. This is an automation that we can run. I can show you later how this works. Then we have a license manager by software. So for each piece of software, we indicate who's going to be using that. So I can remove somebody here, and that's going to change the costs. Or we can look at it by person. We can go through this and determine who is using what. And that's going to affect the yearly cost and the monthly cost of each one of these items. And ultimately, what we want is a software plan. So this is the outcome. So let's take a look at 2025, for example. So it tells us the programs that we're using, the yearly cost, and then the cost per month. And then this also has some login info. So if you want to have username and passwords without really thinking about it too much, you can just create a small formula here that tells you the username and the password for software by person. You can filter here by. That's the software. The real use here is to create the costs and to manage the licenses. So now let's talk about our financials. So we have the budget planner and the financial plan and transactions. So the budget planner is a helper section so that you can prepare your financial plan. The financial plan is your yearly financial goals. So it includes the 4 elements of the financial plan would be your annual budget, your profit plan, your payroll plan, and your revenue projection. And then your transactions refers to the day-to-day operations. So income and expenses, sending invoices, paying bills, and so on and so forth. For some context related to software, when we create our annual budget, we're going to use 4 sources for that annual budget. We're going to use our project income that comes from the projects, of course. Then we're going to use our payroll that comes from our staff. Then we're going to use the software, which comes from our software plan. And then we're going to use our expenses, which come from the budget planner. Okay. So the budget planner is this is a helper table. And what this allows us to do is prepare a monthly budget. So you can see here, there's a monthly budget and the total amount is $31,000. And we have certain categories. So we have payroll, we have taxes and insurance, we have office expenses, we have software, we have training, consultants for the office, not for projects, marketing, and then we have profit, debt, and distributions, and then we have loans, which we keep separate. For each one of these line items, we make a budget per month. We indicate what is the frequency for these payments, when we're going to pay for this, on the 10th or the 25th of the month, what is the payment method, and in which months we're going to pay for this. So if it is not monthly, it's going to say it's other. So this one, for example, is only due annually in February in this example. I could also say it's due on February and then on August, for example. So once we have this monthly budget, we're going to go to our profit plan simulator because we want to make sure that our budget fits our goals. So we go to a profit plan simulator and we select a year here. In this case, 2025 is selected. And this is going to bring in from the payroll plan, is going to bring in the payroll plan amount. And it's going to bring in the utilization that we have. And it's going to calculate direct labor and indirect labor. Then it's going to bring the monthly operating expenses from the budget planner. It's going to convert those into a yearly amount. And then it's going to add to that the software plan yearly costs that we prepared in our software. So you see here you have information from payroll, information from expenses from the budget planner, and then information from software. So now you have your payroll expenses and your operating expenses. So it's going to take those two and it's going to add those up, and that's your total expenses. And then you're going to establish your profit target. And with this, you're going to get your revenue target, your overhead rate, your break-even rate, and your billing multiplier. So if these all look good, then you can say, okay, that budget is working. But if you want to change the budget, you can override it here and you say work with a budget of 45,000. And then it's going to tell us these are the revised rates. And then your break-even rate at 3.13, maybe that's too high and that doesn't pencil in. So this allows you to test your monthly budget and your payroll against your target. So if you don't know what metrics to use, you can target for 1.5 to 1.75 for overhead rate. Which is fairly typical for an architectural practice. So if we remove this override here, we're going to see that we're 1.58. So that's pretty good. We can also override payroll. We can say we're going to hire somebody and we're going to go to 400,000 in payroll, and then our utilization is going to be 75%. How does this look? Say you are okay with that budget that you prepared, that is 31,000. You're going to go to the budget creator. And then what you're going to do is you're going to select a year. In this case, we have selected 2026, so next year, to create a budget, an annual budget for 2026. And then you're going to hit create here. You have 565 transactions planned. And if you open up this, you're going to see all the transactions that you're going to be creating. And it's going to create each one of these that is included. You can exclude some of these, but typically you want to include all of them. And what this is going to do is going to run an automation, and it's going to create 565 records in this case for 2026. And those records are going to be distributed by month. And the way this looks like is once you have the annual budget, it's going to look like this. So this is organized by category, by year, and by month. So this is a summary. But if you actually look at the table, if you look at it by account, it's going to look like this. If you collapse this, you're going to see the totals for each account here. So if you open up training, you're going to be able to see you have a budget for conferences, a budget for training materials, and for technical library. If you open up by office expenses, you're going to see you have office space, phone and internet, and office supplies. If you filter this now, let's expand all this and filter by month. So let's say April or May. Now this becomes a lot clearer. So if you're looking just at May, what line items you include in your budget is up to you. You can get started with this ones. The important thing is that you create an annual budget. And then we can see it by transactions. So this is by account. So an account would be office expenses, but transactions would be office space or telephone or office supplies. So if we look at it by transaction, so office expenses, we have office expenses every month. How much is that supposed to be? Now we have a profit plan, and then this is pretty straightforward. You have number of people that you're working with. You have annual salary expense, direct and indirect labor, payroll expenses. You have operating expenses, in total indirect expenses, break-even cost, profit target, revenue target, net profit target, overhead rate, break-even rate, and billing multiplier. And you can see here, you can compare year over year. If you want other views, you can see it by gallery if you want to see it bigger, or you can see it in the list view. And then you can also open up here and kind of have a bigger view for the profit plan. So this is your profit plan. This gives you the key metrics that you need. Then you have your payroll plan, which is a duplicate of what we have in the staff, just for convenience to have it over here. And then you have your revenue projection, which is all the projects that you have under contract that is going to tell you how much you're going to be invoicing for each one of these projects every month. And the total revenue projection is going to be over here. If you collapse everything, it's going to be here. So the planned amount and the earned amount for 2025, and then the planned amount and earned amount for next year. This is filtered like this by default, but you can of course see last year as well if you want to. And those are the 4 elements of the financial plan. You have the annual budget, profit plan, the payroll plan, and the revenue projection. So let's now take a look at our transactions. And the first table in the transactions tab is the actual transactions table. And this is the table that we use to keep track of and to make payments for every expense in the office. So this is organized by pay period. So I've mentioned this before. Every transaction, whether it's income or expense in the office happens, and in the system happens on the 10th or the 25th of the month. So we have 24 pay periods in the year. Twice per month, we meet together and we review each line item, and we make sure that if it's an expense, it gets paid, and if it's an invoice, it gets sent. The basis for our review is the annual budget. And remember, there's 4 things that are feeding this annual budget. The first one is the project's invoices. That's the income. Then we have the payroll, which is usually the biggest expense. Then we have the software, which is a line item within the expenses. So it's over here. And then we have all the other expenses that we put together in the budget planner to create our annual budget. So those are the sources for this data. Now, this data is the same annual budget, but it's formatted differently, and it's arranged by pay period. So you can see here on the 10th and the 25th, and then next month is on the 10th and the 25th, and so on and so forth. So the workflow that we follow, usually we filter by current pay period and maybe turn on next pay period. So that gives us a sense of how much our expenses are anticipated for this pay period and how much we're anticipating for next pay period. So we go one by one here. These are all marked as paid here. Let's unmark them. We go one by one, and then we check how much we have budgeted and then how much we actually paid. And then we enter a number here if they are different. By default, when we create the annual budget, the system is going to copy this number, going to paste it here so that it reduces data entry. So we can see here office space, $3,500. How much did we pay? We paid $3,500. Rent doesn't change, right? But office supplies, for example, we had budgeted $300 for this, but we actually paid $150. So we would make this correction here. If this was already paid with credit card, we say this was already paid. Then we need to make the payment for the credit card as well. We would go through each one of these, checking the amount that was planned versus the actual amount, and make the payment. Notice that all expenses here are negative. So if I enter an expense that is not negative, let's say 500, it's going to tell me that there's an error. So I need to make sure this is minus 500. The reason why we do it like this is because if you have a negative expense and a positive income, if we turn on the income accounts here, so we do that, this is going to show us the net. And let's take a look at the first months. Let's say February and March, and let's turn on income as well. Because income is positive and expenses are negative, the totals in the groups are showing the net. We have 9,500 here in income, and then we have 13,200 in expenses. The net here is minus 3,700. Now, in this month, the income would be 44,000, but if we look at the expenses, that would be, let's just get this like that. That would be 39,000. So your net in this month would be 5,000. Now, if you look at this at the year level, you can collapse this. You can see here that your net amount for the year is predicted to be $107,000 net positive. Now you're actually showing something different here, probably because we haven't updated the actual expenses in this table. Now, this table is also really helpful if you want to see, for example, what is the status of things, so what is due right now. So these are the payments that are due right now. Or if you want to see, for example, on a given month, what is paid with a credit card. So you can really start to filter and slice the data to get to the information that you need. Now you can also add notes here, and you can add attachments as well. Let's keep going on the transactions table. Let's open up here. Then we have a pay period summary. So after we've checked the payment, we take a look at this table. This is a short-term projection. So it's going to tell you how many expenses you have planned for this pay period, how much you have paid, and how much you still need to pay. And it's going to tell you how much you have in your balance right now. Let's say you have a checking account to cover these expenses. Let's say you have $25,000. And once you churn this in, it's going to tell you by the end of the pay period, you're going to have $82,000 if everything gets paid. So after this pay period summary, we're going to see invoices by status. So you take care of the expense, and then we take care of the invoices. So you can quickly see the invoices by status. We already talked about invoices. So this is essentially the same. Invoices by pay period as well. So this is filtered by previous, current, and next pay period. So you have a good sense of what's going on. Then you have invoices by project, which is similar to what we have in the projects table. It's just here for reference, because if you're working on the transactions, you want to have this information handy. And same with earned fees and projected fees, which we talked about before. And finally, we have payment information, also coming from deals. This is the same Stripe link that we can send to our clients. So all that information is repeated here so that if you're working on transactions, you can easily access that information. Now let's talk about how we keep track of indirect labor activities. And to do that, we use this tab, 270 operations. And these are just the firm operations. It's different from the overall section of operations in the template. And essentially every year, the first project that we create is a firm operations project. And the structure is similar to the main projects. The difference is that this includes different categories that are comparable to the milestones. And then it has activities that are comparable to the deliverables of a general project. And all these activities, they're non-billable. So you're able to log time in your timesheets against this. So let's just take a look at this. So you have a summary. For this one, 2025, you have human resources, you have administration related tasks, you have marketing, sales, accounting, IT, and research and development. You can do whatever categories suit your office better. This is a starting point. In the same way that you assign fees to milestones for a project, you assign a percentage of your budget to each one of these. So what we've seen typically is marketing gets the lion's share of the budget. And then your budget itself, this amount, this actually comes from your profit plan. This is your indirect labor costs. So however you calculate your direct and indirect labor, this is your indirect labor. We don't have that much sample data in timesheet against the tasks that are in these projects, but we have a few records. So you can see here, this is going to track your overhead expenses today. So the data that is associated with these time entries does not go through the invoices and through the income. Now, if we go to the activities, so this is similar to a breakdown of deliverables. So you can see here by categories. So this way, if you're working, for example, in a proposal preparation, you can track your time against that activity in your timesheets. And that's going to be a non-billable task. Is going to go against your operations budget. It's not going to go and punish any of the projects that you're working on. And over here, you're going to see how many hours are logged against these tasks and what the overhead expense is. Let me see if there's any sample data here that will show that. Yeah, so performance reviews, so 24 hours logged against this, and the overhead expense for this is $3,600. So as the year goes by and as people log in their time that is not related to projects, this information is going to be populated and is going to be useful for you to have. And this is summarized in the overhead amounts over here. So this is similar to the invoices. So you're going to be seeing here that in January, there was $3,600 billed against overhead, and in February was 2760 billed against overhead. So this is on a monthly basis. So that's operations. And then we have some key metrics as well. And we have the sales dashboard, which you saw already. Then we have expense dashboard. This is going to tell us also our spending pace. So you want to make sure you're not spending much more than what you should. It's going to break it down by quarter as well. Then you have other things like utilization rate, realization rate. Then you have efficiency rate, billing targets. Then you have staff billing rates, and you have staff profit to date. You have utilization rate per staff. These numbers, they're not accurate. Utilization is never going to be that high, but there's really not that many hours tracked against non-billable time. So that's going to skew your utilization. And then you have also realization rate. So these are good things to have. So you can always come here and consult this to see how you're performing. And then we have the settings section of the template. And these are global settings for the template. This is where you want to start. So you want to make sure you configure the settings before you start working on the template. First one is location settings. So I think we have all the countries here in the world. So wherever you are, you should be able to choose your country. But we don't have all the cities in the world. We have some cities here as a sample. So you want to make sure that the cities in the region that you work on are shown in the template so that you can choose them for your projects and for your staff. Then you have positions and roles, and by default you have a principal, a project manager, a project architect, and designer, but these are generic positions. Every office is different, so you want to make sure you add the positions that you need, and then that you add the roles that you need for each position within your office. So it depends. In here we're showing 3 designers, but maybe you have 3 project managers and 8 designers or something like that. So you want to make sure that your positions and your roles reflect the reality of your practice. We touched base on this when we talked about organizations. There's essentially types and categories, and they have a certain order. I have a separate video of this. It helps us filter and organize all the organizations within the system. And then you have financial settings, and this is going to have our chart of accounts, transaction types, and payment methods. And then you have the trash, and this is going to contain all the records that have been deleted. And what you need to do here is clean it up every once in a while. What happens here is that if you create a project, that project has data that's associated to it in other tables. So the project data is being referenced in the Milestones table, and in the Deliverables table, and in the Invoices table, and in the Files table, and all these tables. And if you take that project and you delete it, then all those tables, they become orphaned. They don't have a way to reference that project because it doesn't exist anymore. And then they are filtered and moved into a trash view, which is then shown here. Because every project has so many records. So for example, a project can have 70 deliverables. If you delete that project, then you have 70 records. You want to make sure you delete those every so often. For example, over here, I have now 1,500 deliverables of projects that have been deleted. So of course, in this template, I do create a lot of projects and delete a lot of projects. There's a lot of information here, but the goal here is you want to make sure you do some maintenance on this trash every so often so you can come here and just delete everything. So that concludes our tour of the template. I hope it was informative. I know it's a long video, but I hope you find it useful. And I'm looking forward to hearing some feedback from you. So please feel free to drop it in the comments or send me an email. I'd love to hear how you're managing your practice, and if this is helpful, that would be great. That's the whole goal. So thank you, and we'll see you in the next videos.